Welcome back, everybody, to the Sexy Business Podcast. I'm Spooky Dangerous, and joined with me, as always, is Lewd Neko.
Hello.
And this time, we are coming to play the hotly requested Subverse. Now, Subverse lives in fame, infamy, I guess, because it kicked off with bajillion dollar Kickstarter in 2019, and with a really, I don't know if big is the correct word, but known company. And we've seen this game in constant development since then, slowly releasing content. And kind of the public reception is mixed by my best assessment. But I've played through what I think is up to date. I played through a little while ago, so I don't know if there's been any actual content releases since then. But I went back in and had a look at and played around and had a look at some of the stuff. And Neko has seen a bunch of rips of the different content and stuff like that, and some streamed gameplay. So we're going to kind of run through a little bit of everything and explain what this game is like and why maybe it's time to have a look at it, because it's getting to version 1.0 very soon, and we might see some big updates. But let me break it down with kind of a summary of how the actual game runs. There's kind of three different things that it does. The first one is the very obvious kind of visual novel content, which is all fully voice acted. The main character, who is actually Australian, is just that kind of lovable larrikin, Deadpool kind of I joking about everything and I'm horny all of the time kind of a thing, which is kind of the protagonist that you would expect in this kind of game. And he is bumbling around in space while things are happening to him. The main girl is his kind of main companion, which is Demi, the computer robot. And then as you play through the game, you will slowly add members to the crew of the other women that you encounter in the universe. And most of this is done through that kind of visual novel style, where there's dialogue delivered, it's voice acted, and you're kind of skipping through it kind of quickly. But then as for the other two modes, the first one is like a bullet hell asteroids shooter kind of a thing, where you're zipping around in a 2D plane and you're trying to shoot ships as they come and get you. And then the third one is like a tactics thing with your actual people on your team will get on the ground and move around in the grids and make their attacks and stuff like that. My personal opinion is that the bullet hell one is just really not for me, and the tactics one was just okay. And if they remove the bullet hell thing, the game would just be Fire Emblem, but you can fuck all the characters, which personally I think would have been better. But that's kind of the quick summary. And then like we have a bonus game mode at the end, which is called Pandora, where you basically can just go through and spend points that you've earned through playing the game and upping your relationship with these characters to unlock sex scenes. So rather than having a scheduled specific sex scene every single time you hit a romance beat, you just earn points where you can unlock whatever it was that you wanted. But I think a good place to start beyond the summary is kind of how we felt engaging with it and having a look through it. And I am kind of keen to get your opinion on it, because I know that you are a bit more familiar with the company before they actually started and got to Subverse.
Yeah. So Studio Foul, for people who aren't excuse me, in the know. So they made a lot of like really freaking high quality animation sort of back in the like mid 2010s or so. Especially with like kind of like well-known series. So I know BioShock was one of the biggest ones. When everybody was making porn of BioShock, they did like this like really sort of engaging, almost erotic movie of sorts involving the characters. They had some stuff with like Tomb Raider, Harley Quinn, some like ninja anime girls, really high quality stuff. And you can still find it. It's on their website and on various websites. They were kind of known for, again, like really good animation, voice acting at a time when like most animations weren't getting, voice acting or like even sound effects. And then especially just the fact that like, they actually had like sort of storylines. So it felt like an actual porno. It wasn't just, a 5-second loop of Elizabeth getting fucked or whatever. And I guess the other thing is they usually had a lot of like monster fucking or beast content in a lot of their animations, which I think will be relevant when we talk about Subverse. But in 2019, they did a Kickstarter, a massively successful Kickstarter. It literally made like 2 million in US dollars, which is insane. Um, and they basically announced that they wanted to do sort of like their own original content, that this would be their own characters, their own story, and it would actually be a like porn game with gameplay. And I think that was one of the big things is they were like, it's not going to be another visual novel. It's not going to be another sort of like 15-minute, like, simulation type game. This is going to have actual fun gameplay. It's going to have a story. It's going to have lots of characters. And then, of course, the big draw was it's going to have all of our animations. So that was like my introduction to it. I remember hearing about it. And then it came out in 2021, or it came out in early access. And I had so many people ask me to play this, and I had to be like, I can't. Um, I currently run on a pretty potatoey setup, and Subverse is a very intensive game. I know it has a very big file size, and because of like the rendering effects that like all the animations and stuff requires, it's definitely one of those you're going to have to actually look at like the specs required before you purchase this game, because I know I saw some negative reviews that were talking about it crashing all the time, and that's probably due to like not being able to handle the Unreal Engine that they're using and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I currently have a pretty beefy PC because I upgraded mine so that I could do video editing and stuff like that and use Photoshop without it being slow. So I don't have any current trouble running the game. Uh, but one of the other things I did kind of want to run through is the format and how the story is presented. Because if you have a look at the Kickstarter page, that it really only introduces 3 or 4 of the love interests, and I think we're up to like 7 or something like that. Um, and basically, every block of the story introduces one character, and then what you had to do to get them to join the team, and then you start the next block where you get the next character. And a lot of the time, they're not super intertwined. Like a lot of the characters that you unlocked previously just kind of like hang out for an assist, or like will maybe have some dialogue here and there, but aren't really super involved. And in stuff like the Pandora system, where you're having these characters come in and fuck them and stuff like that. Your characters that were released earlier on have less scenes, but the characters that were released later on have the characters that were released earlier in them in group stuff.
Ah.
So it really feels like everything that they've made is very focused on what's happening right now, and they haven't gone back at any time and embellished on things or added to things. So it kind of starts small and then gets bigger over, like it's wider over time, which is a little bit strange. But it also sometimes, like if you really liked a character or whatever, they'll just kind of fall off the face of the earth as you get towards the end. Or if you're like I'm only interested in this one character, every time that they're not on screen, you're kind of like, well, why do I care? And stuff like that. As for the actual plot, like some of it's not actually that crazy. It's just kind of a sci-fi romp about the universe. You always have your own goal. You're trying to do stuff and not get into trouble. And then each of the different girls has their own thing that they contribute to like a greater storyline type thing. Like you kind of rescuing someone or breaking someone out of prison, or there's like a big war that was going on, and then you're like, okay, well, we're going to escape with this person or whatever. None of it's actually that crazy, but like it's just fine to follow along and gives the characters opportunities to have fun interactions, and obviously the main character to say and do funny thing. When this game came out, I feel like there was a big hunger for that Deadpool kind of character, where the main character just says and does the funny thing and is incredibly pansexual and makes jokes all the time. But I feel like now, in a post Deadpool x Wolverine world, that the desire for that just doesn't exist as much anymore. So I am curious to see if 1.0 will actually still like feel impactful with the plot and the storyline, or if the main character is just going to be fucking intolerable and you'll skip through everything just to look at the titties. So it's kind of hard to
Yeah, I
tell.
did notice that. Like I didn't get like super in depth because like they are pretty long story segments if you're listening to
Mm.
all of the voice acting. And if you're just skipping through or reading in your head, it's probably a lot faster. And I saw somebody in like a recent review, describe it as Reddit humor. And I was
Yeah.
immediately like, that's how it feels. Because, like, on one hand, there were like a couple of jokes where I was like, okay, that's cute. But it's like when it's just constant quips, like every 5 seconds, I don't know, it just gets grating. I'm also not really a big fan. I feel like a lot of like Western visual novels and Western porn games do this, where like they feel like they have to be funny and like fourth wall breaky and like satirical the whole time. Like, isn't it silly that this is a porn game and that there's
Yeah.
sex here? Because like I don't know, I feel like a lot of Western devs are afraid to take things too seriously because I don't know, they don't want to be seen as like I don't know, too serious, or like, oh, like you're trying to make something pornographic, artsy, or
Mm.
actually have a story, and we don't care about that. Whereas like I feel like a lot of Japanese porn games like tend to actually have pretty in-depth stories. Like Dona Dona is a pretty good example where like it is like a porn game and it's very focused on all of its sex scenes, but it has like a genuinely pretty interesting story, even if it is trying to be humorous at some points.
Because if you don't care about the character, how much can you really be invested in them over the other characters in the roster when it comes to the different scenes? For me, playing through some of them, some of the characters I just didn't give a shit about, still don't. A lot of them kind of overlap a lot in tone, and all of them have almost exactly the same body silhouette.
Mm.
Like 5 out of 7 of them are the same kind of lithe, medium bust kind of characters, and then based on what alien race they're supposed to be, they'll have some changes in the headgear or whatever. We have one dwarf type character, um, one incredibly petite character who has frog feet, is the best way to describe it, and a helmet that she can't take off. And then she's the most different from all the other ones. They all like fit really closely within a range, right? So the actual character design itself isn't insanely imaginative. So if you were like looking for something really really specific, then unfortunately it's probably not gonna be there. But I also did want to kind of go over what the content is in some of the scenes, because I know a lot of our listeners are exclusively interested in Futa content and Futa X male content, according to some polls and stuff that we have run on the Patreon. And I regret to inform you there is exactly one Futa on male scene. Pretty much anytime the protagonist, the only male character in the entire game, is in a scene, he is the top, except for this one Futa X male scene where the dwarf character is topping him. Every single other time that there is Futa content, it's Futa on female or Futa on Futa. And none of them are full package Futa as well. It's like they have this weird little disc thing that they put on and a dick comes out of it.
Like
Um,
a futuristic strap on.
Kinda, yeah. It's supposed to be like a cybernetic enhancement type thing. But it's really like, if Futa is your niche, it does feel a little bit like a letdown. Of the scenes, only a couple of them I'm like, okay, wow, actually this is really good. Whereas like everything with Demi, where she's the top and is footed up, is good, I think. And then some of the other ones just kind of miss a little bit. Especially when it would have been so easy to have every single scene have an option between the two. And you could have made every character be optionally Futa, and then like just change the rigging to be anal or whatever instead. Because there's just actually not really any customization when it comes to the different scenes. Everything is kind of loaded into a grid, and then when you spend the currency, you unlock that scene, and then you are able to kind of play it in. They have like this Windows Media Player type thing where you queue up a bunch of scenes and it kind of runs through them for you, which is also kind of irritating because it means if I have one favorite scene from each of the different girls, I can't do that because I can only pick scenes from one girl's list of scenes to put into the player at one
Aw,
time. So like,
boo.
yeah, actually running through it and trying to curate the ultimate wank sesh is kind of clunky and awkward. So I don't know, it's just like so close to being good. That's my whole problem. Like playing through the whole thing, I put like, I don't know, 15 hours or something like that, something kind of lowish into the whole thing, just kind of casually playing through the story, going and doing some of the unlocks so I can do some of the romance stuff. The character that I found myself enjoying the most, I was the most surprised at, which was the Huntress character, which is the like incredibly petite one. She just seemed the most interesting, which is, it's kind of like an enemies to lovers storyline. And then just like everyone else felt kind of flat and bland, and like the main characters kind of get old and then stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so admittedly, like I'm already sort of against this in that like I don't find sci-fi erotic, I guess. Like I don't really care much for like alien chicks. Like they're cool and all, but to me they're always just like a hot girl with blue skin.
That's it. It's
And
very
like
human plus. It's not actually very alien.
whereas, like, I don't know, I feel like the fantasy genre sometimes gets more into like, okay, these actually look like monster characters in some way. I will say I do like their cat girl design. I don't know if this character's in the game yet, but
She
she's on
is,
the
yeah.
website. Yeah, I do like her design. I think it hits the nice niche where I'm like, okay, this is a humanistic furry, but I do like that she at least has like the fur legs and arms you sometimes see
Yeah.
like furry type characters. Like I liked her probably the most just like visuals wise. She's also 6 foot, which awesome. Um, one of the things I also didn't care much for is the alien designs. There's lots of alien characters that will fuck the girls at various points. Some of
The
them are very clearly
mantics is what they're
modeled.
called.
Yeah, some of them are very clearly modeled off of certain kinds of real world animals that I feel like Studio Foul probably wouldn't have been able to sell a game with if they had included them. So part of me wonders if maybe the sci-fi genre was a tactical choice. But they're ugly and like not in like the fun ugly kind of way. They're just kind of like boring looking to me.
Yeah. They are kind of
So
gross. The tentacle ones are the only good ones.
yeah, but like tentacles are like so like classic. It's like it's really hard to fuck up tentacles, I feel
Absolutely.
like.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good warning. So if you are somebody who's looking into this game, if you're expecting a lot of content that's like the protagonist, fucking the girls, like if you like to self-insert in that way, you might feel a little kind of disgusted or disappointed by this game because a lot of it is like monster fucking, which can be kind of gross to some people, or just like female and female or female futa scenes. So more of a word of warning, I feel like. It makes sense, I think, for Studio Fow to have so much of the monster content because that was like one of their big things when they were producing animations. But I feel like when it comes to eroge or porn games where people are self-inserting, they're trying to imagine themselves as this cool pro tag who's, super funny and he gets all the bitches, and then you don't actually get to see him always get all of the bitches. I did see some reviews that complained pretty specifically about that.
That's interesting. It's the ultimate power fantasy, right? Is to be Ryan Reynolds on a sci-fi ship with a harem of women, apparently. To give some weight to it, of all of the characters' scenes, they're pretty much somewhere between 10 and 15 different scenes. And then for each character, they have about 5 scenes with the mantics. So nearly 1/3 of the game is monster fucking. And then each character has somewhere between 1 and 3 futa option scenes. And then everything else is either solo or with the protagonist. So you're really looking at about 5 to 7 scenes that are all machines. There's a couple of fuck machine scenes.
Mm.
So I feel like the mix ratio is really weird, and especially when you can't really free cam or get multiple angles from most scenes. Like there's so many minor things that they could have done to increase what the content is, like to reach more or last longer or whatever.
Yeah,
And give some that customization options. It just feels like it's really lacking.
yeah, because I feel like for most of us, if you funded the Kickstarter, you funded it because you really liked Studio Fow's animations. And if you're buying this game, you were probably buying it because you really like their animations and their character designs. And they are like really high quality relative to this genre. But I feel like what I liked about Studio Fowl was their like ability to create a sort of narrative, like to create really long 10-minute sort of animations rather than like 30-second loops. And I feel like that's the most disappointing thing is that you're mostly looking at loops. I'm a kind of person where like I don't enjoy the never-ending loops. I especially don't like the ones where like the orgasm part either isn't good or just doesn't happen. The cum
Or
shot is
you
so
can't
important to
see
me.
anything. There's a lot of
Yeah, I
climax ones where it's just they don't change the camera angle so you can see things better or give you an x-ray or anything like that. And they just all it really changes is it maybe goes a
boo.
little bit faster or they kind of pause and hold in place and the voice acting is different. And it's kind of underwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like especially for 3D animation, like one of my favorite things about 3D compared to 2D is I feel like when it gets it right, when it comes to like the cum shot or cumflation, which is something you can do with like a sci-fi genre,
Mm.
is like you can make it look really cool. And so it was really disappointing. I was like scrolling through like the galleries of these animations, and I was like, why do all of the cum shots look so mid?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that if it's 3D, the number one advantage of 3D over 2D is the camera movement. With 2D, if you want to change the camera, you have to redraw the whole scene from a different angle. With 3D, you just pan in Blender. It's like instant. So for them to just still have everything at like a camera that you can kind of slide to one side or whatever, like you can't actually rotate around the scene or anything like that, is really weird. Like it must be so jank that you can't actually move around without seeing it clipping or some things I can imagine, especially with some of the kind of angle it's like shown to be something, but isn't actually like penetrating or whatever. It's just like kind of like angled to be happening, but you can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like I said, I didn't actually play the game. I found some footage on X videos where someone had used a recently added free camera mode, I think, for some of the scenes and
Mm,
was doing free camera stuff. And yeah, so one of the problems is like with some of the scenes, there's like some pretty relevant clipping and like again, like, you know, clipping is going to happen in 3D. It happens a lot in porn animations, but when you're paying for like this $2 million game, I expect there to be actual like collision on like the dick going in the pussy because that's a thing you can do, and I've seen plenty of other animators do it. So it's really
yeah,
disappointing to see them just like settle. And then I did see like exactly, and I wasn't sure if this was a glitch or something that's going to be patched out, but there was one scene in the free camera where like they moved the camera angle and there was no dick. Like she was being
yeah.
penetrated and like you could see her pussy spread, but like I guess her leg was probably in the way in the original angle and to cover it up because it was like a monster character or something. And that was like super distracting. I was like, wait, what?
Phantom limb. But
Yeah.
also, there's like, where is the liquid sim come? Like, surely we could have an absolute fire hose monster creature that's just gonna
Right?
blast them with something. The game is good, right? But the issue is knowing what they've been given, knowing they had $2 million. It's had 3 years. They've had a pretty successful career until now. It's hard to not be disappointed. And seeing things that they've done better or seeing things that exist and are not that much harder to include, that it really feels like this 1.0 release has got to jump up quite a bit and add a whole bunch of shit. So like I wonder if a lot of the updates and stuff that we've had have just been focusing on bug fixing and then focusing on getting out that big block of story that introduces the new character. And then now once they're getting towards the end of the story and then they complete the story, they go, okay, this is 1.0. Now we're just doing things that are going to improve the game. We're going to, upgrade Pandora. We're going to go and add much more scenes and stuff like that. Because we kind of have the same problem, right? Where the first thing you need to do is make the game long. One of the main complaints about Shackles of Elswyn is that the game is not long. And I'm like, well, that's because we wanted it to be wide instead. And if you don't play through any of the routes, you get to the end and you go, well, where is the rest of it, right? Because you're not exploring and you're just playing through one route. Instead, if you make the game long first, they go, wow, cool, that was great. I played through my one thing. But there wasn't very many options. But you go back and add a whole bunch of stuff and then you start to make it wide and build it out that way. Seems to be the way that the customer base is expecting from you. So if that is the thing that is happening and they are going to come back and add a whole bunch of this stuff and like upgrade the quality of it, then that kind of makes sense. Because what's the point on releasing an update that people aren't going to come back and play because all you've done is added quality of life stuff? There's no like actual content. I guess is kind of my thought.
Yeah, so it looks like from the 1.0 version, which is coming out probably pretty soon, is, you know, the big ad is of course they're going to add in basically the rest of the animation. So they're going to sort of give some love to characters who don't have as many scenes, finish up cinematics, stuff like that. It seems like the other thing they fixed is like the game's overall pacing. Apparently, there's some problems with like the tutorial section being kind of like chunky and bad. There's some issues with like it feeling very grindy, so they added more rewards so that way it feels less grindy. Some minor changes in like the visual novel segments. I will say one thing is they are adding a bit of customization to the loops, so you can change hairstyles and clothing. Which, as a clothing slut, I love clothing changes or clothing options in porn games. That's already a pretty big bonus for me. I'm like, okay, that at least makes it a little bit more unique. Or you're taking advantage of the fact that it's 3D and that it's way easier to do like, an outfit swap or something like that. I
Yeah.
am curious how much the price is going to increase when it goes 1.0, because right now it's $30, which I would say overall, if this is your kind of game, you can probably tell by this point. If you like shoot 'em ups, if you like tactics, and you like, loops and these waifus look hot, I think $30 is a fine and dandy price for this game. But I think if you don't enjoy those styles of gameplay, or if you're expecting like really like, absolutely like 10 out of 10 quality tier animations with no issues, you might end up being disappointed or just bored. So that would be, I think, like the biggest deciding factor is like, do you actually enjoy the gameplay? If you don't, just wait for videos to show up on X videos.
Yeah, because you kind of have to be really invested to want to play through all of the story and then kind of get to the character, right? Like, some of the stories are kind of good in kind of showcasing what is supposed to make that character unique, but it can be really easy to switch off or like not be interested. Like, I found the dwarf character, which is the small blue one, kind of annoying a lot of the time. Like, it has that really squeaky child VA, but the plot was just like all about introducing sex and violence to this place that is like incredibly like restrained, and it's like, okay, sure, I understand how this is relevant to the plot and like why it's a it's kind of like a commentary on porn in general. I'm like, that's fine, but it's like playing through the whole thing is like kind of a pain, and then you get to the end of it, you're like, yeah, cool, I've unlocked all these sex scenes and stuff, but I just don't care about this character. I'm really not that interested in like the character design and stuff like that. And then it's like, well, also this is the only Futa on male scene in the entire game, so it's like finally something in my niche that I'm interested to see, but the character I don't give a shit about and I'm not interested in. So it's kind of hard, and I hope they do add a whole bunch of more stuff like that. And like you, I am also excited about outfits, because why would you spend all this time doing this character design, which includes outfits and stuff, for them to be permanently naked in all of the sex scenes, which is kind of weird to me. Because there's a lot of ones which is it's like not even penetrative. Like if it's just head or whatever, surely they can have clothes on for that. It's foreplay. So it seems weird with some of the choices that they've made, but like I said, maybe it's because we're about to get the coolest, biggest update of all time or something.
Yeah, I will also say, I think overall the voice direction is pretty good. Pretty impressive to be fully voice acted. I know that's going to be a major benefit for a lot of people, especially those of you who hate reading. Like, you just hate the process of reading. This is a game you can listen to and just sit back and, stroke your dick while they talk about space or whatever. And they have some pretty major voice actresses that you probably recognize from like other animations or other games in this one. So that is something that I would give it props to. Although it sucks that the one dwarf character has an annoying voice.
I feel like if you love that kind of lolly character, it's fine. For me, I'm just like, whatever, I don't care. It's kind of annoying.
Yeah, I listened. I didn't listen to like too many of the late game characters, like mostly like the four like sort of entry girls, and I thought they all had some pretty nice voices. And that is one nice thing about the animations is like the sound effects and the moaning does add a nice touch to it that not all 3D porn games really get.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing is that, and I know I've mentioned this before on the show, but I'm very much a porn on mute kind of guy. Most of the time when I'm, having fun with myself, I'm just reading like comics. Comics is like my go-to thing. So to come through and be playing games and being like, wait, no, actually the audioscape is really supposed to be part of the experience. I've been spending a lot more time and like trying to make sure. And with this, because the game goes, okay, you're in this cutscene, you're talking to someone, or I need to know what's going on, or like the visual novel type stuff. Like, okay, I need to know what's going on, and then you're like battling and fighting. I'm like, well, especially in the space shooter section, I need to hear where the things are coming from, right? So like so much else in the game is very audio important. To then come to the actual sex scenes and stuff and be like, oh, okay, this is definitely what's happening. But a lot of the actual voice acting in the sex scenes, because it is a loop, is looped and makes it feel kind of repetitive faster, Because like there's something about the beats that they do the loop with where it's not a short loop. It's a short loop repeated a few times with a minor variation in between the loops to make it feel like a longer loop. Like the way that they've actually positioned it is pretty clever. But the audio is just a looping wave file, which means that you are going to hear the exact same thing in there. And like music is so much easier to pick up when it's looped, right? Because you're used to listening to the rhythm, you're used to listening to the tempo of it, and so that makes you catch up so much faster that you're like, okay, yeah, I've heard this 100 times already. Which is kind of a letdown. And when you change stuff, like some of them have a speed slider, so it's like when the speed slider should change, a lot of the other stuff should like change to match. And sometimes it does, sometimes it's not quite dynamic enough. I'm a bit of an audio snob, and this is why I watch porn on mute. But it's hard, right? And it's another one of those things where it's like they could spend a day and they could make this whole thing a little bit better, and maybe it is something that they are going to do, but I think their goal for right now has just been getting content into the game.
Yeah, I can understand that. And I will say, like, again, I wonder if it's just like sort of a growing pains because like they didn't really make a ton of loops before this. Like most of their content was like either like the long form sort of cinematic porn stuff or like they did like a couple of like short videos, but they weren't usually loops. So I almost wonder if this would just be better if instead of giving like 200 like really short loops, like instead like having like 100 sort of like plotted out scenes where you can actually like there's like foreplay and you see the whole scene progress and there's a sense of like I don't know, chemistry or like intimacy to it, because that's like what I really enjoyed about their stuff is like seeing the actual like progression. That's something that like sometimes bothers me about loops is that like I don't get that same sense of like progress, or it just feels unnatural, I guess. Like, it breaks my immersion because this isn't how you would have sex.
Yeah, the actual first time, so in the story plot, when you reach the climax of the arc with the character and they come and join you on the Mary Celeste, that's when you fuck them for the first time, and it does actually have that kind of choreographed longer scene where you do get a few foreplay beats, you do get an actual sex thing, and then it's just the Pandora system, which is kind of the endgame sex content, that is so jarringly like that.
Yeah, I guess it feels more like you're sort of earning unlocks that are
Yeah.
not really connected to anything.
Yeah, it's just bonus content, I guess. But look, that is the end of our time. I think Subverse is a very interesting game, and I think we're both very excited to see what's going to happen yet. Like, it's not a bad game. We're not super disappointed with it. We don't think it's horrible, and I'm not looking for a refund, right? And I know a lot of what we said has been on the negative side, but I
It's
think
actually
that's
really good overall.
that's right. Like
Most people like it.
compared to some of the competitors, it is actually very good. And the problem is that when you're comparing it to other video games, like other, shooters, bullet hells, other tactics games, right? Like this is never going to stand up to Fire Emblem, and the character design is never going to stand up to something like Fire Emblem. But it is really interesting to see what they are going to be able to do. And I think we're both looking forward to seeing what the future of this project is going to be like, to see if we can actually have a very high quality and serious porn game development studio to kind of elevate the platform. Instead of the classic thing, which is the Mass Effect, where you play the game for 60 hours and you get like 5 seconds of sex scene, which is kind of whatever, or like Cyberpunk or whatever, right? Whereas now it's like, okay, actually, this is a sexy experience, which is part of the thing. And I think Subverse is a little bit too parodical and satirical to kind of fit that exact idea. But I have a hunch that it might open the space for something a little bit more like that to come through and succeed in a big way. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. But for you, loyal viewer, now that you have survived all the way to the end of our episode, I am curious to know which one of the characters is your favorite. I am a self-confessed huntress simp, and I'm curious to see if there's anyone else like me out there. And then, hopefully, we're going to be seeing you all in our next episode on the Sexy Business podcast, where we try and talk about all the interesting things that are going on in the NSFW space. And if you click the like button, you click the subscribe button, we get to have the happy Neko here in the office. Bells are ringing, chirping, having a great time. So please click all the buttons, and then hopefully we'll see you next week.
Bye.